Hi and welcome to EasyBot's Rtfm, where I read the manuals aloud to you. Today's episode is Plaits, Macro Oscillator. About Plaits. Plaits is a digital voltage-controlled sound source capable of 16 different synthesis techniques. Plaits reclaims the land between all the fragmented islands of sound produced by its predecessor, braids. Its built-in low-pass gate and decaying envelope generator allows it to be used as a self-contained voice, in particular for percussive hits. Front panel. Controls. A. Model selection buttons, and LEDs displaying the active model. Each button cycles through a bank of 8 models. The second bank is focused on noisy and percussive sounds. B. Coarse frequency control. By default, it covers a range of 8 octaves, but it can be narrowed down to 14 semitones. Refer to the frequency knob range section. CDE. Model-dependent tone controls. Their actual function varies from model to model. In general, timbre sweeps the spectral content from dark sparse to bright dense. Morph explores lateral timbral variations, and harmonics control the frequency, spread, or the balance between the various constituents of the tone. F. Attenuverters for the timbre, FM, and morph CV inputs. When the corresponding CV input is left unpatched and the trigger input, 3, is patched, the attenuverter adjusts the modulation amount from the internal decaying envelope generator. When unplugging a CV input, and if the trigger input is patched, remember to reset the attenuverter to 12 o'clock if you do not want the internal envelope to take over. Inputs and outputs. 1. Model selection CV input. When this CV input is modulated, 2 LEDs are lit. The steadily lit LED indicates the current model, and the slowly blinking LED indicates the central value, which would be obtained with a CV of 0 volts, and which is still modifiable with the buttons. Note that when the trigger input is patched, model changes occur only whenever a trigger is received. 2. CV inputs for the timbre, frequency, morph, and harmonics parameters. 3. Trigger input. Serves 4 percussive purposes. Triggers the internal decaying envelope generator. Excites the physical and percussive models. Strikes the internal low-pass gate unless the level CV input is patched. Samples and holds the value of model CV input. 4. Level input. Opens the internal low-pass gate to simultaneously control the amplitude and brightness of the output signal. Also acts as an accent control when triggering the physical or percussive models. 5. Volt octave CV input. Controls the fundamental frequency of the sound from -3 to +5 octaves relative to the root note set by the coarse frequency knob. 6. 7. Outputs. The aux output carries a variant, sidekick, or byproduct of the main signal produced on out. Adjusting the internal low-pass gate and envelope. Hold the first button, A, and turn the timbre knob to adjust the response of the low-pass gate from the voltage-controlled filter amplifier to the voltage-controlled amplifier. Turn the morph knob to adjust the ringing time of the low-pass gate and the decay time of the internal envelope. The value of both settings are represented by 4 yellow LEDs. Adjusting the frequency knob range. Hold the second button, A, and turn the harmonics knob to select the range of the frequency knob. The first 8 settings correspond to C0 ±7 semitones, C1 ±7 semitones, and so on. The last setting with all the LEDs lit corresponds to the full 8-octave range from C0 to C8. Synthesis models. Pair of classic waveforms. Virtual analog synthesis of classic waveforms. Harmonics, detuning between the 2 waves. Timbre, variable square from narrow pulse to full square to hard sync formants. Morph, variable saw, from triangle to saw with an increasingly wide notch. braids, seesaw. Aux, sum of two hard-synced waveforms, the shape of which is controlled by morph and the detuning by harmonics. A narrow pulse or wide notch results in silence. Waveshaping Oscillator, an asymmetric triangle processed by a waveshaper and a wavefolder. Harmonics, waveshaper waveform. Timbre, wavefolder amount. Morph, waveform asymmetry. Aux, variant employing another wavefolder curve. 2 operator FM, 2 sine wave oscillators modulating each other's phase. Harmonics, frequency ratio. Timbre, modulation index. Morph, feedback in the form of operator 2 modulating its own phase, past 12 o'clock rough, or operator 1's phase before 12 o'clock chaotic. Aux, sub-oscillator. Granular Formant Oscillator, simulation of formants and filtered waveforms through the multiplication, addition, and synchronization of segments of sine waves. Harmonics, frequency ratio between formant 1 and 2. Timbre, formant frequency. Morph, formant width and shape. Aux, simulation of filtered waveforms by windowed sine waves, a recreation of Braid's Z models. Harmonics control the filter type, peaking, low pass, band pass, high pass. Harmonic Oscillator, an additive mixture of harmonically related sine waves. Harmonics, number of bumps in the spectrum. Timbre, indexed of the most prominent harmonic. Morph, bump shape, from flat and wide to peak to narrow. Aux, variant including the only subset of harmonics present in the drawbars of a Hammond organ. Wavetable Oscillator, 4 banks of 8x8 waveforms assessed by row and column with or without interpolation. Harmonics, bank selection, 4 interpolated banks followed by the same 4 banks in reverse order, without interpolation. Timbre, row index, within a row the waves are sorted by spectral brightness. Morph, column index. Aux, lo-fi output. Chords, 4-note chords played by VA or wavetable oscillators. Harmonics, chord type. Timbre, chord inversion and transposition. Morph, waveform. The first half of the knob goes through a selection of string machine-like raw waveforms. The second half of the knobs scan a small wavetable. Aux, root note of the chord. Vowel and speech synthesis, a collection of speech synthesis algorithms. Harmonics, crossfades between the formant filtering, SAM, and LPC vowels, then goes through several banks of LPC words. Timbre, species selection from Daleks to chipmunks. Morph, phoneme, or word segment selection. Patch the trigger input 3 to trigger the utterance of a word. Use the FM attenuverter to control the intonation and the morph attenuverter to control speed. Aux, unfiltered vocal cord signals. Granular Cloud, a swarm of 8 enveloped sawtooth waves. Harmonics, amount of pitch randomization. Timbre, grain density. Morph, grain duration and overlap. Aux, variant with sine wave oscillators. Filtered noise, variable clock white noise processed by a resonant filter. Harmonics, filter response from LP to BP to HP. Timbre, clock frequency. Morph, filter resonance. Aux, variant processed by 2 bandpass filters, with their separation controlled by harmonics. Particle noise, dust noise processed by networks of all-pass or bandpass filters. Harmonics, amount of frequency randomization. Timbre, particle density. Morph, filter type, reverberating all-pass network before 12 o'clock, then increasingly resonant bandpass filters. Aux, raw dust noise. Inharmonic string modeling, modal resonator bank. For your own pleasure, aim many rings. When the trig input is not patched, the resonator is excited by dust noise. Harmonics, amount of inharmonicity or material selection. Timbre, excitation brightness and dust density. Morph, decay time, energy absorption. Aux, raw exciter signal. Analog bass drum model, harmonics, attack sharpness. Timbre, brightness. Morph, decay time. Aux, emulation of another classic bass drum circuit. Analog snare drum model, harmonics, balance of the harmonic and noisy components. Timbre, balance between the different modes of the drum. Morph, decay time. Aux, emulation of another classic snare drum circuit. Analog hi-hat model, harmonics, balance of the metallic and filtered noise. Timbre, high-pass filter cutoff. Morph, decay time. Aux, variant with a different flavor of tune noise based on ring-modulated square waves. Note, all the models listed on this page employ their own decay envelope and filter. The internal low-pass gate is disabled for them. Installation. Plaits requires a minus 12 volt, positive 12 volt power supply, 2x5 pin connector. The red stripe of the ribbon cable, minus 12 volt side, must be oriented on the same side as the red stripe marking on the module and on your power distribution board. The module draws 50 milliamps from the positive 12 volt rail and 5 milliamps from the negative 12 volt rail.